Welcome, dear learners. This lecture on religion and culture has been developed based on the selected references available. As myth is centered around in every religion and culture, this lecture has taken myth as conversational for the whole lesson in detail. Dear learners, the whole session is divided into overview of myth, myth and ritual in culture and its significant role, etc. for the discussion purpose. It is also an important point to emphasize that to understand the nexus between religion and culture, we must know what constitutes religion stronger in a culture, because the lifestyles of a community may be understood by receiving the resources of oral traditions which constitute the whole knowledge system of a community. Further, it reveals all its lifestyles of a community through its ethnic journeys. At this context, the whole lesson matter has been made based on socio-cultural anthropological aspects of the study of myth with some examples. Shall we now go to the topic? Dear learners, as objectives of this lecture, learners will enable to understand the relation of religion and culture in everyday life, to discuss the religion and culture with a view of myth, to understand the different concept of religion pertaining to culture. Myth is a story that has a parallel structure linking the past to the present and suggesting directions for the future. A myth may be a cautionary tale, as in the urban myths that teenagers tell about the dangers inherent in parking on dark side of roads. A myth may also be a moral tale, as in morality plays and bedtime stories. Myth also may be about idealized behavioral standards, as in hero myths, as a sociological term. However, the primary use of the word has been rather casual. Sociological writers are likely to refer to the myth of masculinity, the myth of self-esteem, or the myth of the mummy role. This use of the term imputes a less than factual status to the topic of reference and calls into question the veracity of others' accounts and theories. However, sociology currently lacks clear concept of myth such as found in anthropology or cultural studies. Myth is a form of meaning making that seems ideal for sociologists, yet few have risen to the challenge of studying its process. Myths are generally assumed to be text, more specifically verbal text. Through images can be text too, and usually written verbal text, though so much of mythology is orally transmitted. There is great diversity in local mythology is throughout South Asia. Local mythology is expressed in vernacular literature, oral tradition, folklore, and folk and tribal arts derived from the most ancient times and have influenced both Vedic and Puranic mythology. Myths have been studied by cultural anthropologists, historians of religion, biblical scholars, psychologists, and folklorists. For Malinowski, the claims to the status and power legitimized by myth had come into existence as the result of purely sociological process, which meant that his supports to myth did not rely upon imagined but undocumented rituals in the distant past. Just as importantly, in saying that myths legitimated existing claims to power and status, that myths contributed to social stability. Thus, his theory was well studied to the functionalist thinking that was taking hold in anthropology during the 1930s and 1940s. Myths found in the community may fall into one of the classes: periodic natural changes and seasons, other natural objects, extraordinary or irregular natural phenomena, the origin of the universe, the origin of the gods, the origin of animals and of mankind, transformations, heroes, families and nations, social institutions and inventions, existence after death and place is of the dead, historical events. Dear learners, it is to be noted that particularly origin myth has the following functions such as meteorological, physical, ritual, historical or humoristic, artistic, ethical, mystical or allegorical, etc. Particularly, the history of study problems with religion, including the subject of myth or at least ancient as recorded history, and hence a full history of the study of means would have to begin a very long time ago, if not in that an datable period hidden from us in which religion originated. Explicit intellectual discussions on the subject are closed towards and have an important beginning with the ancient Greeks. Some of the standard methods of explaining myths owe they are first formulation to the Greeks, so rapid survey of mythology in the sense of study of means ought to commend with them. The concentrated intellectual discipline of a religious historical study is, however, much more reason it cannot be said to begin until the 18th century, not coming into its own until the early 19th century. Myths deal about origin of the species, including human being, become intelligible when it is realized that they are the scheme of political and ceremonial relationships. As Mayer Ford's noted about myths, especially origin myth of the community, narrate about the kinship and marriage pattern and marriage alliance between two groups and denial of marriage as because of the person from outside the group. Like William or Bascom emphasizes the importance of the study of folklore in anthropology, especially in the fields of kinship, economics, law, religion. Richard Bauman quotes with those words that folklore is a function of shared identity. Malinowski states that human culture gives its members of definite version of the world a definite zest of life. Robert Redfield opines worldview as the way of people characteristically looks outward upon the universe. According to Clifford Geertz, worldview is nothing but the way community thinks what actually they are and the concept of nature, of self and of society or community. Myths in a culture are oral tradition. The source of these origin myths are found in palm leaf manuscripts or any local form which is available. How the form is transmitted through myth, the researchers view that the tradition has really lost in recent years at the temples that used to sponsor local festivals and now support festivals of another kind, local term Vira and Utsavam, so and so. The transmission of the story is found, there are three cycles. One is narrating the story, which we can say as a narration part. The second part is practicing the ritual, enacting the practice. According to myth ritual theory, this is characterized as myth as primacy, rite as a primacy, myth and rituals as coexistence. As a culture gets developed, its ritual practice and narration part of the myth is also getting developed equally. The important thing of this myth and ritual is to become another genre for the existence. If sacred character of myth and ritual is lost or forgotten, then it will become another genre, folk tales, says, and sometime in dance, music for the existence. Myth is to provide an explanation. Myth and ritual are not coextensive. As like that, enactment of myth is also observed among the community in the form of folk ballad in which a story is sung. It is to be noted that this theory of myth ritual used for identifying the folklore genres. Now we will move to the narration part. The narration of a myth may be found in the form of story. The story is performed in art form that also may vary from region to region. Most of the stories are narrated form in a traditional in performance form, art form or musical storytelling where narration is mixed together with music. For example, a traditional art form of Villupattu is performed in the Kanyakumari, Tirunelveli and in some parts of Thuthukudi districts of Tamil Nadu and South Kerala districts such as Thiruvananthapuram and Kollam. The performers are narrating the stories ranging from mythological to social events. The art form Villupattu is a performance tradition in which form both stories and death stories of gods or goddesses are narrated. Here the important thing is that a bow song carries the meaning as it moves into performances. Bow is made out of a long bamboo or palmyra beam around 8 feet and centrally mounted on pot. The musical instruments which are essential for the bow song as drummer and cymbals and some wood and tabla, harmonium and mosing, etc. Artists in that bow song tradition are categorized as lead singer, pot player, drummer, wooden blocks player, cymbals player, harmonium or keyboard, tabla, assistant to the lead singer, means the second. Generally, bow song performance is ritual and non-ritual. It depends upon the relevant context. As a ritual art, it is conducted usually during festivals, particularly Amman festivals of Tamil Nadu, that represent the stories of Amman and other folk goddess and goddess. Stories are sung during night and it is continued to the next day morning too. Generally, the text consists of aspects of invocation, respect for the teacher, introduction of the story to the audience, pardon for any lapses in the story and narration of the story, and finally it ends up with Valipattu, means the final session. In other words, the narration has a structure. Invocation starts with praise songs to Ganesha, then about the Satan story, which means INR, then praise song to Guru, teacher to the board, then the story starts, followed dialogue and ends with the Valipattu. Jokes, riddles and ethical instructions find prominent place in the performance. Social, political and cinematic references are effectively used to influence by bards. The performance is held largely during the time of January to June. Now we will move to the ritual part. Ritual is basically defined as a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. It may be religious ritual or life cycle rituals. Both have distinctive or unique features as they hold respective and significant role in every unit of society and culture. Most of the ritual is based on certain actions performed in an accepted situation in a group. The group can be defined as society or culture. The enactment part is the story of particular Amman or god or goddesses is sung in the ritual as in the following manner. There are story of INR. Most of the folk ballad or folk epic is started with the prosody of Satan, means INR. Satan is known as local deity in every settlement, like in the southern India. That deity is considered as a god of every village. Thus, Satan is given importance in the story of every folk ballad. As god or goddess story begins with praising the Satan, nowadays a Ganapati is given more importance in the position of Satan. The story of INR or Satan is common to be visible in all the folk ballad, while the ballad is scribed by a bard. Body of the story, in which war between Bhadrakali and Tarakan is said, victory of Bhadrakali and the creation of community, particular occupation and migration, and the Amman, how it considered as the mother of a local community. Then it ends with naming of the particular people. It is also to be noted that myth in practice is seen among the community during all their rituals of the goddess or the Amman story. And even known making gruel is traced in the origin myth of that community, particular local community. That event is represented by practicing in the present day. It is an important event for making gruel, and the same is shared by with all the participants who were gathered in the ritual. It is reflected the myth where the Amman, the goddess, offered gruel to her warriors during the war over the Tarakan. The same event is strictly followed in the ritual. Thus, the ritual is interpreted in the following: how the community offered the fruits to the Amman and as they were told to offer to their mother. Second one is by enacting the gruel making at largest level in the village, it recalls the grand event happened in the past, and the same is fostered the validation of the origin of particular community. Generic form of the particular myth. Though the print media got widely developed in temples, keeping the early manuscripts is believed to be sacred. So, people give more importance to manuscript, palmly manuscript. If the script is in the form manuscript or any other form, it may fade away. For the need of giving more importance of this text, they arrange one board to write down the stories in new leaves or in a new notebooks as printed version. To indicate boards, there are three names. Most of the boards were called Pulavar, the term for scholar of learned man since the earliest noted in Tamil literature. Others used the title Perumal, the great ones, an epithet of Vishnu and name normally forbidden to locals. The third name, Pandaram, is a priest, in another word, priest among the same group. So, a performance gets successfully summoned deities with their stories are accurately presented, and the manuscripts are considered the most authentic form of a story. The demand for authenticity is that in some temples, the manuscript becomes a script from performance. It is read line by line to the lead singer who in turn sings. The palm leaf manuscript is given to be copied under condition of that new copy and original must be presented to the owners. Taken only it is allowed to be taken away. If it is a temple copy, no one will be allowed to take that script except the person who got the order to sing the story in that temple. If he is not familiar with that temple's text, he is allowed to see the text with some assistance from the village with the formal permission of temple officials. Today, the manuscript replaced by two new forms. One is handwritten form, another one is printed form. But keeping the original script is temple is believed to be sacred object. What are the narrators or the performance is most of the singers and bards from the local community, which most of them are associated with their deity, because it is purely sacred one. Now, we will move to the next part, form and narration of the myth. Narration, traditional story or a myth of a god or a goddess is identified in two ways. One is singing the story and another one is telling the dialogues. It stands as verse and prose. Verse and prose are defined by textual features of language, whereas song and speech in the bow song are distinguished by features of articulation. It ultimately stands on delivery style. The story which was delivered in song form may be repeated in the dialogue form. To give more importance to the character of story in the myth, these techniques is followed by the bards, means the performer. While narrating the story, prior and simultaneous compositions are used. Prior composition on prior preparation is nothing but the bards recall what someone else has composed, the earlier one. In addition to that, there are several styles among the bards which they have been adapted from the modern cinemas. By accepting some techniques from the cinema, they deliver it to audience in various styles. But it is not advisable while singing the story. Dear learners, so far we have discussed core idea of religion and culture in the following: the overview of myth, myth and ritual in culture and its significant role particularly on performance. It is also an important point to emphasize that to understand the nexus between religion and culture, we could understand how a myth is being enacted in a community and its narrators and the form of narration. Performing the myth is reflected in a ritual, and the same constitutes religion stronger in a culture. It is an approach which basically studies the sociology of religion for the deeper understanding on religion. To uphold this perspective, we have discussed about various nuances of culture in terms of myth with the support of views expressed by various scholars. I hope you all must have enjoyed the session and it may have enriched the knowledge on religion and culture. Dear learners, we will meet with another schedule. Thank you. All the best.